The ability to remember is a beautiful gift from God. The ability to remember takes us back to great things in our childhood, maybe takes us back to our wedding day, maybe takes us back to this time of year, graduation days. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It keeps us connected to people, places, and events that shaped us and influenced us, just to be able to lean back and remember, to go back in a moment. There are events that we should never forget. Memorial Day commemorates some of those. This special day started near the end of the Civil War, and within years, there were practices of placing flowers on military graves all over the country. It was called Decoration Day. And it spread not just to military graves, but to all graves. We remember. After World War I, it became a national holiday to decorate graves of those who made the ultimate sacrifice of freedom in serving our country. When we think about Memorial Day, we think back to those who have given their lives in military service, and we honor them. I'm sure that if I go out to Valley Road today, or maybe tomorrow, to the cemetery out there, that our local Boy Scout troop here from the church, sponsored by the church, I'm sure that they have their flags out there for all of our military. Every year they do. Every year I go out there and see my grandfather's World War II flag out at that cemetery. And every year the young men serve and remember that. It's part of remembering what people do to serve us. In fact, I remember going out there when my grandfather was alive still. He and my grandmother would take us not just for the military decoration and the military flags, but to decorate the graves of those others that we have lost, those that have gone on before us. I remember my grandmother tenderly leaning over the grave of her son that she lost in her early 20s and cleaning it off, cleaning the moss off, and lovingly caring for it as another step towards still remembering and still loving. I remember her taking a marker out and saying, "You can't even see his name anymore," and filling in his name with the marker because it was her way to remember and to love. On Memorial Day, we remember. We remember sacrifices people made in the military, and we remember our loved ones that we lost in the military and elsewhere. Sometimes people forget to remember the sacrifice that was made. Sometimes Memorial Day becomes the extra day off work and the barbecue day and the time with family. That's good stuff too. That's good stuff too. In some churches, Memorial Day isn't talked about or preached because it's not a religious holiday. It's a secular holiday, but an important one. I had this conversation with Marion last week. I said, "Marion, I am all set to preach on the Holy Spirit this coming Sunday, today. And it's Memorial Day, and I think I'm missing it." And she was, kind enough to say, "Yes, you're missing it. Preach on Memorial Day. Preach on the Holy Spirit when you come back. It's always here, right, Marion?" And so, it's Memorial Day. We don't want to forget either. We don't want to be part of the group that forgets. We want to remember those that have gone on before us because that gives us hope. And we want to remember those that gave the ultimate sacrifice for America to be in a better place, those soldiers. And I dare to count not those that just lost their life, but the ones that Tom spoke of, those with the Purple Hearts that are still carrying it out, that are still carrying the wounds of battle though they live. And those like my cousin, who still carries post-traumatic stress disorder from his time in Iraq. He still carries the wounds. Though they have not passed, certainly they have given. They have given much. And we don't want to forget. So how did God walk with those soldiers in their hardest times? How did he show them his presence in those moments? Well, he did just the same thing that he did for David in Psalm 23, and really that he does for us. So let's listen. We're going to hear this a couple of times today. Jim just read it, I believe from the NIV version. Jim, is that what you read out of? NIV version. This version is the New King James Version. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So many people have clung to that. Our military has walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and I'm sure that they have clung to that. So many of us have clung to that at a funeral. And though the phrase reads, the valley of the shadow of death, we don't have to be talking about death. There are times where you walk through that valley that does not lead to death. Times where you walk through stresses and darkness and difficulties. Walking through that valley. The valley of the shadow of death makes you think of a dangerous situation. And this is a shepherd picture. So we have two things going on here. We have an actual, literal shepherd picture going on, but then we have the figurative. God's saying, you are the sheep. I am the shepherd. I will walk you through. And so if we have the literal shepherd taking people through, taking sheep through, why would they do that? Why are you going through this valley of the shadow of death? Why? This is not good. Why would you want to do that? Well, shepherds are good shepherds, but they know that the valley is necessary. Sheep, dumb sheep, we've talked about dumb sheep before, dumb sheep, will eat the grass until the roots are gone and then will starve themselves because they have nothing but dirt. So the shepherds have to graze them through different areas. And sometimes to get far away to different grazing areas, you have to go through tight little mountain passes. So this was written in the area of Israel, and they actually do have a valley called the Valley of the Shadow of Death, where you can only get daylight if the sun is noon straight above you coming straight down. And it is dark, and it has craggy mountainsides, and there are animals that live in there, and you have to follow the shepherd tightly because you can get grabbed if you are a sheep. But on the other side is green pastures, food, because you've eaten all the stuff on the other side, a better place. So the shepherd leads these sheep through just like our God leads us through dark times, because there are better things on the other side. If he leaves us where we are, just like if the shepherd left the sheep where they were, they would be worse off. So it is worth it to go through that dark valley to see what is better on the other side. So that is why the good shepherd would take them. And the sheep are in peace because the shepherd is with them. Looking at what David says here, it's really important to listen to the words. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. He isn't stuck in this valley. He's going through it. The key word is through. Valleys are what we go through, not a place where we permanently camp out. Valleys are not dead ends. They are tunnels with a light on the other side. And that is true whether a dark valley is a tough time you are going through, or whether for some of our servicemen and women, that valley of the shadow of death truly led them to heaven on the other side. It is worth going through the valley to see what is on the other side. And Jesus, the Good Shepherd, will lead you. Mountaintops are great, faith is great, excitement is great, but the valleys are where our faith is strengthened. The valleys are where we build our character to become more like Jesus. And so we need to refuse to get discouraged in these dark valleys and instead walk through them. with the shepherd and be led through them. Another very important point on Psalm 23 is that God is present. You are with me. He never, ever leaves people alone in these valleys. You are with me. He promises us his power, but also his presence. We never walk alone when we have God, the Good Shepherd. When we look at these verses, it's interesting to think, when you look kind of from an English teacher kind of side, it's interesting to see David develop his relationship with God. In the beginning, he's talking third person. He talks about God. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. It's a little distant. Third person's a little distant. It's a little bit almost, passive. This is what he's doing. He's there, but this is what he's doing. Then we get to the valley of the shadow of death. Everything changes. I'm in that valley. Times are tough. Suddenly, he changes to second person. You are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. Suddenly, when David was in the valley of life, the valley of the shadow of death, God became so much more real to him, so much closer. In the valleys, we don't want to talk about God. We want to talk to God. This is where religion changes into a relationship. We are more prone to talk about God when we're in the green pastures. When things are good, you talk about God. Who is God? What is God? God out there. But when you are in the valleys, you are talking to God. God, help me. God, bring me through. God, I need your presence. God, I can't make it without you. That is a faith-growing experience that brings you to green pastures, better times on the other side. Every member of our military has walked a dark valley before, I am sure of it. As I have said, my daughter Teresa, she was in the military. She was Air Force, and she was one of the few female snipers in Iraq when they were closing down the base. Must be 3 or 4 years ago now, maybe 5. And she said to me, she says, all right, Mom, I can't tell you why, but you're not going to hear from me for a while. And when you do, things will be different. I'm like, what? She can't say things. And then she gets home. Praise God, she gets home. And now she can say things, where she was, what she saw. She's able to, but she can't. That valley was too dark. She had walked something too hard. And when I hear her speak sometimes, kind of out of nowhere, she'll say something. And it shocks me. And it takes me back. And it makes me wonder what it was like to stand in that dark valley that I will never understand. Which is part of what brings me to tears when I think of the service of our military. When I know the depth of what I don't know of what these people have seen and who they have stood next to that didn't come home with them, even in my own family, even in my own household. I know that our military has walked a dark valley, and that's why we remember them today. We remember the men and women of our military who laid down their lives for the cause of freedom in our land. And we remember that if it were not for our courageous soldiers, we wouldn't have the freedoms we enjoy in America today. The men and women who have given their lives for the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, they're the heroes of today. They are. And as I think about how when we consider those that have gone on before, we're often considering wars that have been in the past. But there are people still on the front lines today, standing in that dark valley, walking through the valley of the shadow of death and facing things. I hope that we continue to keep them in our prayers as well. There are people standing there today. So, as I had said, we are going to read Psalm 23 a few times. This is the third and final time. This will be the New Living Translation. A little more relatable, a little more warm, a little more personal. And as I read Psalm 23 once more, this time a little more slowly, I pray that you meditate on the words. Because these words were true for the psalmist who wrote them. They are true for those who we remember this Memorial Day, whether military that were lost in service, or whether our loved ones that have gone ahead. And they're true for us today. Us sitting here, they're true for our military in the front lines. They are true for those that continue to seek God. And so we will end with one final reading of this. If you'd like to close your eyes and meditate and reflect, that's up to you. But one more time, let us listen to the Psalm of David, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid. For you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all of the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Praise be to God.